Horror Coast to Coast is a movie review podcast featuring strong language, horror film spoilers, and discussions of violence, gore, and disturbing subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Horror Coast to Coast, where we discuss horror movies from opposite sides of the continental U.S. From a Bay State lighthouse that's also a radio tower, I'm Brian.
And from a seaside town in Northern California, I'm Michelle.
And this week we're talking about The Fog from 1980 and its 2005 remake.
Okay, so the summary for the 1980 version is strange things begin to occur as a tiny California coastal town prepares to commemorate its centenary. Inanimate objects spring eerily to life. Reverend Malone stumbles upon a dark secret about the town's founding. Radio announcer Stevie witnesses the mystical fire, and hitchhiker Elizabeth discovers the mutilated corpse of a fisherman. Then a mysterious iridescent fog descends upon the village, and more people start to die.
All right.
Does a lot for a summary.
Yeah, that was pretty detailed and pretty much describes both of them more or less.
Yeah. Okay, first impressions, I'll tell you mine. I think it's interesting that I always notice movies that are made on the cusp of one decade always feel like the previous decade. I thought this had a very strong 70s vibe, even though it was released in 1980. And then right away, we go into Stevie doing her radio thing, and I didn't quite get it at first. Mostly because the line I picked up on was, "Keep me turned on for a while, and I'll try my best to do the same for you." And my first thought is, what the fuck? Is she like a phone sex operator? What is this? So I was like immediately kind of thrown by that. And it took me a minute to like realize that she was just a radio announcer, but then she was also giving the weather, talking to the weather dude. And I think I wasn't familiar with that kind of coordination. I always thought that the weather is kind of already provided for the people on the radio and they read the weather. But yeah, she was like calling the guy in the weather station on her own to get the information. And then my first impression is Jamie Lee Curtis, who is perpetually 17 and 47 at the same time. And it is very awkward that she has sex with the guy that she gets that she hitchhikes with.
Yes.
Yeah, so those are my first impressions.
So this was shot mostly in, or maybe entirely in 1979. So I agree very much it's got a 70s feel. I noticed right off the bat a few connections to Halloween, not just the first one, which, Jamie Lee Curtis is obvious. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill both worked on The Fog and Halloween. And then Tom Atkins is in Halloween 3.
Oh, okay.
And he's also in Halloween 3 with a woman who's much too young for him. So there's also that connection.
I think that's common.
And then his character, Nick Castle, is named after the stuntman who played Michael Myers in the first Halloween.
Whoa.
So there's just, right off the bat, I noticed like so much interconnections between the Halloween movies and this one, so that was interesting.
Okay.
And yeah, were they just contractually obligated to have Jamie Lee Curtis in every horror movie of this era?
I do not know, but one thing I did read when I was looking up this movie is that apparently she was having trouble getting work after Halloween, and so John Carpenter wrote this part into the movie specifically for her.
Oh, okay.
And I do think it kind of felt like an afterthought, honestly.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so that's why she doesn't have like any part to play in the story or
No
serve any
connection.
purpose whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
No
wondering
connection to the
that.
characters.
That explains some things.
Yeah. Okay, so we know that John Carpenter's the director, but a couple of movies I didn't know that he did. I didn't know that he did Escape from New York. I didn't know that he did Christine. I didn't know that he did In the Mouth of Madness, so that was interesting. But yeah, and so it takes place in the fictional seaside town of Antonio Bay, but it was actually filmed right around where I live. So it was filmed in Bodega Bay, Inverness, and Point Reyes. So basically Sonoma and Marin counties in California, which I thought was interesting. I mean, he mentions Bodega Bay in the film, so
Yeah, so John Carpenter and Deborah Hill worked together on this Halloween 1, 2, and 3, Escape from New York, Escape from LA, and they produced the remake together.
oh wow, so they're like screenwriting partners.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, so what I knew going into this, there's something in the fog, it kills people, and Jamie Lee Curtis is in it. That's literally all I knew going in. Did you know more about it?
No, I knew very little about this. So, up until like a year ago, I didn't even know. I heard that it was about ghost pirates, which, isn't technically correct, but it told me more about the movie than I knew. I just knew it was about fog. So, I thought it might be almost like a more of a blob situation where it's the fog itself. I didn't know until pretty recently that it was about ghosts.
I came away with the impression, I know that you have seen The Thing. I have not. And I came away with the impression that I may have felt a little differently about this movie had I seen The Thing. Do you think that's maybe any connection to this movie in terms of the way it was made and the storyline and things like that?
Um, I don't know. I don't see too much in common with the
Okay.
thing.
Okay, I just
It has a
okay.
very different feel
Okay.
than this to me.
Well, I'll have to watch it one day. I haven't seen it, and I feel like because
It's one of my favorite
well,
movies, so we'll
yeah,
have
and
to
I
put
knew
it on
that,
the
and
list.
I was thinking because it is one of his most famous films, I think it's considered his best film. Halloween is probably his most famous. But because The Thing is considered his best film, I'm wondering if maybe if I had seen his best film, then I would think about this differently. Because now that you mention it, it does kind of feel like Halloween as well. Just the flow, the way the story's told.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I guess I'll just come right out and say it. My overall impressions, I hated it. I I hated it. I I mean, I found some things that were interesting and well done. I think it's very cool that Jamie Lee Curtis did a movie with her mom. Um, I don't know how often it happened. Maybe they did several movies together, but I just think it was just a cool thing to me. Um, I was not a fan of Adrienne Barbeau's sultry radio voice. There was just something about it to me that felt, I don't know, maybe it's because Delilah irritates me and it kind of gave me Delilah vibes. Um, the first deaths were gruesome and unexpected, but up until that point, I was kind of bored. And I think that's how I felt while I was watching. In between the slasher parts, I was bored. So, I did find it a little hard to kind of keep up with this movie, and I did have to stop it and rewind a few times because I missed something that someone said. And then, what the fuck is a stomach pounder?
I don't know.
Okay, because the kid is like, "Mom, can I have a stomach pounder and a Coke?" And I wrote that down. I was like, "What the hell is a stomach pounder?" Um, I looked it up, and the internet doesn't have any idea. Some people have said that it's something that John Carpenter just completely made up, but that seems so weird. It has to be something. It has to be something, but, anyway, so then, yeah.
Maybe it was a thing in John's house growing up and he didn't know it wasn't a
Yeah,
thing.
maybe it maybe it's some, like, inside thing when he was a kid. Yeah, that could be it. And then, obviously, my next question is why the hell is Jamie Lee Curtis tagging along on these investigations? It was just so weird and out of place, but
Yeah.
that was strange. And then I also read that Adrienne Barbeau was John Carpenter's wife at the time this movie was made, and it felt a lot like he was just trying to give her as much screen time as possible, because I really didn't think that her role was all that important until the very end, where she's actually telling people where she can see the fog. And we can get to that later, but I felt like a lot of the shots and the storyline involving not Adrian, Stevie, I just didn't think it was interesting. Yeah, so I don't know what I feel like I am maybe throwing you for a loop here saying that I hated it.
Yeah, so for me, I liked the character of Stevie, and I like I first of all, I love the setting that it's a radio tower that's also a lighthouse. I think that's just great. I liked, the vibes of the music she was playing, and just her announcer voice was very, like, of its time, and I like that about it, because this is actually one of my favorite, like, times aesthetically for horror movies. I love the vibe of the late '70s in horror. So, that is one thing this movie very much had going for it for me, and it also basically the other section of the vibes would be the historical piece, and I also really liked that aspect, and I thought that was done in a cool way. So for me, the whole movie was like I was on board with its aesthetics.
I agree with that. I do think that I didn't have an issue with the aesthetics. Like I said, it reminded me a lot of a similar way that Halloween was shot. I don't know if I'm across the board if it's my favorite across the board, this era in horror. I think it's maybe one of the eras I am most familiar with because as a kid, I feel like late '70s horror was kind of a big thing. Like it came on late at night and stuff. So I feel like I was exposed a lot to it. Um, I don't know if I would say it's my favorite, but I did like the aesthetic. I thought the aesthetic was good. I just the stuff about Stevie, I agree with you that it's a cool idea. She's in a lighthouse broadcasting her show, which makes sense why she's getting reports. Or maybe she's reporting to the weather station what she can
Yeah.
actually see, and they're telling her that's not what we see on the radar. So, I mean, that was interesting. I mean, I'm not saying like the movie was trash. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that for me, I thought it was boring. I had a hard time. It there was I found it was hard for me to stay focused on it. And like I said, I think it's because at least from where I'm sitting, it moves slowly in between like the big pieces. But I did have, I have a lot of things I did like about it. So
So I chose this movie this week because, well, essentially every John Carpenter movie is on my watch list and I haven't seen it. So I got this for $1 at the flea market. And if I remember correctly, the guy I bought it from specifically told me not to watch the remake.
oh, really?
So I might have violated our verbal contract there.
Oh gosh, you owe him $1 or damages of some kind. Huh. You watched a DVD that you actually own?
Yes.
Oh, so maybe that explains my experience a little bit. I watched it on YouTube with ads.
Ah,
So I had to keep Oh, wait, no, that I'm misremembering. That was the 2005 version that I watched on YouTube with ads. I watched this one on a regular service. I think it was on Amazon Prime. So never mind. My explanation's withdrawn.
okay. What I was saying about the vibes of the late '70s, on the opposite side of that, my least favorite aesthetic decade is the 2000s, specifically because
Early
of
2000s.
what I'm now discovering is like CW core horror remakes is basically like its own genre. Have you noticed this?
I was literally gonna say, like a CW show, because that's I mean, obviously, it doesn't help that Tom Welling is Mr. Smallville all up in here, but yes, 100%. It has a CW, I don't know, everything is about dumb people in their 20s pretending they're teenagers
Exactly.
and all this drama, and
Yes.
yeah, that's I 100% understand that, and I felt that too.
So there's this. There's House of Wax with Jared Padalecki.
Oh, okay.
There's My Bloody Valentine with Jensen Ackles. There's Friday the 13th with Jared Padalecki. So this is like a whole like little mini subgenre of mid 2000s
Yeah.
CW star horror classic remakes, and it's such a weird thing that so many of these exist. And there's more too, but those are the only I can remember.
I'm sure there's some I was gonna say, I'm sure there's some with, Chad Michael Murray that we haven't thought of.
Oh, I think he was in House of Wax actually.
Really? I was gonna say he's another
Yeah.
CW actor.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, those shows were big around that time, so people wanted to see those stars, like, doing other things. They were just, like, making the money where they felt like they could.
but man, I like Supernatural, but the characters in all of the movies I just mentioned are just the worst. And the acting, it's actually elevated by the CW stars in the movie, which is not a good thing.
I don't think I've seen any of those remakes. I definitely did not see House of Wax, because isn't Paris Hilton in that one?
Yes, she is.
Yeah, I did not see it.
I saw it in
Um,
theaters
what?
because
You
I
went
was
to the
15 at
movies?
this time. I'm the target demographic of this Fog remake.
I mean, kind of. I was 20 at the time. But yeah, no, you're probably right. CW feels very teenager.
It was a PG-13 remake.
Oh, was it? Oh, maybe that was the point, just to open those movies up to a different demographic. Hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely like so the 90s started like the teen slasher craze with Scream and I
Yeah,
Know What You Did Last
I know what you
Summer.
did last summer.
And then as a result, we got like this slew of films, and they're just so much worse.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
Oh, and it's also worth noting that The Ring was also a PG-13 remake, and that movie slaps.
The Ring, I'm surprised that it was PG-13. I was under the impression that movie was rated R. But I guess looking back on it, as long as there's no sex or violence or whatever the standard is, they can just slap a PG-13 rating on it. Even though the content, I think, is way too scary for
Yeah, it's not
I don't
about
know.
how scary it is. It's about sex and gore, and
Yeah,
that
no.
movie doesn't have any of that.
I don't know. I would still have a problem.
I mean, that's why Neverending Story gave my entire generation nightmares.
Yeah, because all those movies were rated for kids and they were not kids' movies. I told you my story about Gremlins, right?
I don't remember if you did.
So Gremlins is rated PG, and
Yes.
not remembering the details of that movie, I was like, "Oh, Mogwais are cute, the girls will love it," and I think I showed it to them when they were, like, 5 and 8,
Oh.
and the
Mm.
second Gizmo gives birth to all the other ones and they all, like, start turning into gremlins, the girls, like, fucking freaked out. And I kinda did too because the ways that they end up wreaking havoc in the town and killing people, I mean, one of them, like oh, to kill one of them, he puts it in a microwave, and, like,
Yes.
there's goo and grossness everywhere. Anyway, so I ended up looking it up, and apparently, at the time Gremlins was made, there was no PG-13. It was
Yep.
PG or R, and so they didn't wanna rate it R because they wanted it to appeal to kids, and so they rated it PG, and I wanna say the moms rallied and fought for a rating in the middle, but from what I understand of the story, Gremlins is the movie that prompted a PG-13 rating to
Really?
be created. Yeah.
Because
So,
I'm pretty sure that Poltergeist was rated PG.
yeah. And I think that's a
That's
little
insane.
before. Yeah, Poltergeist was
Yeah.
really scary, actually. Okay, so themes. I mean, this is a pretty obvious theme. It's just ghosts returning to get their revenge. I do think it was a little unclear whether they wanted to kill everyone in the town or because it was maybe built using the money that was stolen from them, or if they
Yeah.
really were just aiming for the 6 people who were responsible for killing the people on their boat. So, that was something I thought was a little unclear about what the ghost's intentions were, but I can forgive that because I feel like, you're dead, you're allowed to have some miscommunication, right? I don't care about that. I'm like, "Ghost, what do you want?" Actually, it's fine. You can be a little hazy about this. But the idea of vengeful ghosts, I was thinking about it, in a like, a broader context. It kinda feels to me like those stories prey on our fear of death, and a lot of the times, the vengeful ghost comes back because their body is mishandled, right? So it's like the fear of how our bodies are handled or treated after we die, but a lot of it has to do with the circumstances surrounding our death. And it's sort of this idea that, the fact that we die is in and of itself unfair. And so we strive as human beings to have our deaths be as fair as possible in these stories. I don't know if that translates into real life, but in a lot of the stories about vengeful ghosts, it's all about the circumstances and how unfair things were, if they were wronged and if they're able to rest, because obviously people can't rest until they get closure, until, they feel like everyone who deserves vengeance is has vengeance wreaked upon them. Um, but I thought that was interesting. And so my takeaway from that is ghosts are obsessed with justice, right? And which is not a new idea. In terms of storytelling, like I said before, I just think it was boring. Fogs aren't scary. They're not dark. They're not mysterious. They're not chilling. I don't know. I just wasn't on board with it. I just think there have been way scarier stories told. I don't get the hype or the cult following of how scary it is. I get the hype and the cult following of how well the movie was made, but when I was looking up things for this, there's a whole Reddit thread of people being like, "Oh, that movie was so scary when I watched it. Oh, it gave me nightmares, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "I don't see how, guys." Um, I will say there is a possibility that I'm looking at this from a modern perspective and, like, had I seen the movie when it came out, I might be one of those people saying, "Oh my god, it was so scary when I watched it." But, I'm seeing it years later, and I'm also comparing it to all the other movies that I've seen that I think are scarier. So, that is maybe a little disadvantage I have, not being able to divorce myself from other things that I've seen. Um, but aside from that, there were no other real themes that I could spot. I didn't think there were any, like, musical themes that were repeating or anything visual. I think the big theme was just, like, the idea of ghosts and, uh, restorative justice a little bit, I guess. Um, and yeah, so that's it. But I did wanna say one thing. It's an island in the 1800s. Just turn off all the lanterns, the old lanterns, and let the leper ship just float around in the dark. They'll never find you. I don't see what the fuss was about, but anyway. So, let's actually get into that part of the plot because it all happens at the beginning.
So it opens, we get an old man telling kids the old legend. And the old legend, according to him, is that a fog rolled in back in the 1800s, and the ship, the Elizabeth Dane, it spotted a light. It thought was a lighthouse, but it was actually a campfire, and it crashed at shore. And that's why the fog is haunted. So he tells that story to a bunch of kids. One of those kids is the son of one of our protagonists, Stevie, the DJ.
Right.
But later, in an exposition dump by another character, Father Malone, he learns the real story because a book flies off his shelf.
I was gonna say that. A book just randomly falls off the wall.
He points out it happened at the exact time that, as we'll find out, the man named Blake, who has become our ghost, our main ghost, was betrayed. Basically, the ghosts were deliberately sending him the message.
Okay.
And from reading that book, he learns that it was his grandfather who betrayed Blake, who was a leper, trying to set off and form a leper colony. And they didn't want a leper colony forming, so they killed him and his shipmates and stole all their gold. And that was the origin story of their town. So that's how the remake opens, right? Is that they're just we start in the flashback and they're basically just setting it on fire, right?
I think so. But what happens with the remake, which I wish they had just done it in one scene, they took the flashback and they split it up along the course of the movie so that as things went on, as the movie progressed, you learned more and more about how it went in the
Yes.
1800s. And so I don't know. I think it should have just been one scene at the end, at the beginning. Who cares? But like one scene, because cutting back between that and what's currently happening, I just didn't think it worked because the stuff that was currently happening was just done so poorly. So why break it up? Just keep it as one part.
That's why I had no problem jumping back into the past because those were the only good parts of the movie.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, they should have just had that section be one thing because that by itself could have, I think it could have elevated the movie a little bit if it was just one part. It would have run for like 10 minutes. I don't know.
Yeah, so
Huh.
that it would be like the Friday the 13th remake where the first 15 minutes are good and then the rest is all just garbage, so you only watch the first 15 minutes.
I mean, okay, maybe. Maybe that's what happened.
But I do want to point out that after that flashback, when we cut to modern day in the remake, it opens with Sugar We're Going Down Swinging by Fall Out Boy and immediately just sets the entire tone of this movie as being the most 2005 thing you'll ever watch.
Yeah, no kidding. It was the music was a little, they had to make it modern. They had to update it. I don't know. I don't know what you want from them,
This
Brilliant.
to me is probably like the worst, most egregiously unnecessary remake I can think of. And it's crazy that it was produced by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill because they just totally like it changed all
Wait,
the wrong things.
they produced the remake?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't read that. So I read the director is this guy named Rupert Wainwright, who isn't known for much. He's known for Stigmata, which I saw a long time ago, and Blank Check, which I remember as a
Mm,
kid, starring Brian Bonsall, who's the lead singer of the Ataris. And that's the only thing I know him from. Those are the only movies that I knew. But we did have a couple of changes here with the characters too, because before we have Tom Atkins as Nick
yeah.
and Jamie Lee Curtis as Elizabeth, but I didn't catch her last name.
Her last name was Soley.
Solely. Okay, and then Janet Leigh is Kathy Williams, who I want to say is like the mayor of the town at that point.
Yeah,
But
she has
I'm
a
not sure.
very
I think
small role.
who? Kathy Williams?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like she was the mayor in the first movie, and in the second movie, the mayor was a random guy. And then Kathy Williams, what was her role there? It was even smaller. But I think she's the mayor because when Father Malone finds that book, the journal, she's the person he shows. And she's the person that he tells, maybe you want to reconsider this founding Father's Day you guys are throwing. And she's like, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of, so either she's just someone organizing the event or she is the mayor, because I figured those kinds of things, like, the mayor of the town is, like, spearheading it usually. But, okay, so Nick we have as a pretty similar character, except way hotter in this one. In the later one, obviously, they got Tom Welling to play it. And then Elizabeth is now Elizabeth Williams, played by Maggie Grace. And then Stevie Wayne is Selma Blair. And so those characters are basically the same, but they felt the need to like make that little change so that probably they could have the ending that they had, right?
Yeah, I guess. We'll talk about the remake ending. But
Okay.
so one of the changes is that in the original, Nick Castle just picks up Elizabeth and it's like some random like 20-year-old hitchhiker. And they immediately start fucking. And she's immediately going on quests with them.
Right.
And in the remake, Nick and Elizabeth are like exes who are the same age. So that change, it made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It because their relationship in the original movie is like, what is going on here? Why are you hitchhiking and hopping in bed with this random 45-year-old man.
Yeah. Really, really awkward. And I wrote that down. Hitchhiking was taken out because we don't do that anymore. That's
Yeah,
just not a thing. It used to be a cultural thing in like 70s movies. You see people hitchhiking all the time. The beginning of the Hulk, he's hitchhiking. At the end of every episode, he's hitchhiking somewhere else. It's not a thing anymore. We don't do that. So it was taken out. They had to do it. But yeah, they do close the age gap considerably to nearly nothing at this point, which did make sense. And I agree with that. And I did notice that Elizabeth and Kathy are now mother and daughter as characters, as opposed to the original film where they were mother and daughter because the actors were mother and daughter and the characters were not related at all.
yeah,
I don't know if they did that as a nod back to the original movie. It didn't seem like the fact that they were related had anything to do with it, except to establish the fact that Elizabeth was actually from the town. Because in the first one, she's not from the town. She's like, "Oh, I'm from Pasadena. So what the heck are you doing there? And why do you stay? Why did she
yeah.
stay so long?"
It's like, why are you in this movie at all? You just kind of wandered in completely randomly. And it makes sense that they just wrote her in to give Jamie Lee a role.
And
That
that's not to
explains
say
so
that she was
much.
bad.
I mean,
She
no,
was
her
just
performance was fine. Her character was just nothing.
yeah,
And she strolls in randomly and just becomes the love interest of a random man for no reason.
yeah. Okay, so
So in both movies, the inciting incident essentially is that a boat called the Seagrass disappears. And in the original movie, Nick Castle is a friend of the fishermen who were on the ship. And in the remake, for some reason, Nick owns this boat. And the people who went missing on the ship are like random frat guys who are partying, and one of them's his friend.
right.
That was also a strange, like, let's relate to 19-year-olds type choice, I guess. It's
Yeah.
like, they can't relate to working class fishermen. Let's make it a frat party.
Well, I also was wondering if maybe the trend in the early 2000s was to make it so that horror movies didn't feel like they could really happen. Because the feel of movies like Halloween and even this movie, like you mentioned a second ago, his friends are like working class fishermen. They're
Yeah.
real people that live in this town. None of these people in the first movie, I would argue, they're not caricatures really. Like they're real people. They
Yes.
could be real people. This could be a real town. And that maybe is what makes the horror element more um feel closer to home.
Yep.
And I wonder if the trend in the early 2000s horror films was to not do that, to make it feel like this couldn't possibly happen to you. It only happens to beautiful people
Yeah.
who are between the ages of 19 and 27. It doesn't happen to regular people. These are just horror films. I don't know why they felt like there was a need there was a market to create a bunch of horror movies that were just not just unrealistic, but also happened to people you couldn't relate to in the slightest. I don't know why it was
Yeah.
like that.
You're really touching upon something and why I just hate this era and this style. And I feel like part of it does stem from the CW, like Buffy was super popular. So it's like, yeah, let's just have like beautiful people and it won't be that scary. But Buffy worked because it wasn't a horror movie, it was like a
Hey,
fantasy adventure.
also, huge little nitpicky thing, Buffy wasn't on the CW. Buffy was on WB before it became
Oh,
the
yeah.
CW.
Yeah.
So and I actually really strongly feel that the quality of the shows changed significantly after that change was made.
I mean, I agree, but we could swap it out for like Supernatural. And I really
Sure.
like Supernatural. And I do not like the Supernatural star centered horror remake genre
Yeah.
because Supernatural was never trying to be scary. It's an adventure.
Yeah.
Speaking of adventure, I just want to talk about at the end of the remake, we get very clear views of our ghosts, and they reminded me of two other ghosts, and that's from Pirates of the Caribbean and from
Yes.
Return of the King, two fantasy adventure movies, because they're not scary. See through CG skeletons are not scary. They're fun,
Yes.
but they're very, very not scary.
Yes, you're right. I didn't even catch that. I guess I just took it for what it was. Yeah. See through skeletons. Not scary. And I mean, that's maybe that's the idea. It's not supposed to be scary. They're trying to make it
It seems
horror
like it.
adjacent.
But at the same time, the kills are kind of more violent and disturbing. So let's just talk about there's a couple major kills. The first one is Dan the weatherman who's been talking to Stevie on the radio in both movies. And in the original, he basically just walks off after getting a creepy knock at his door. And I think they just take him into the
Into the
fog.
fog. Yeah.
And then the next kill in both movies is the babysitter of Stevie's son. And in the original movie, she answers the door with the creepy knock and she's just
Yeah.
taken into the fog and dies off screen. And in the remake, Tom the Weatherman is like thrown through a window and set on fire. And because
Yes.
it's 2005, Stevie's like on a video call with him, so she sees
So she
him
sees
die
it. Yeah.
instead of just hearing some strange noises like she did in the original.
Right.
And then the way that the babysitter dies in the remakes is like she's got her hand in the sink and a hand comes up and grabs it and it like disintegrates her. So like
Yeah.
that's pretty disturbing if you're trying to not be scary. I mean, the CG sucks, but the idea of it was pretty cool.
Yeah. On top of the fact that the kid doesn't see it happen in the first one. The kid only sees her go through the door. In this one, in the newer one, the kid walks in and finds her crispy ass body just laying on the kitchen floor. So, yeah, I mean, maybe that's it. They get to take a little bit of liberties with how they kill the characters and make it a little more unrealistic, but more gruesome. I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's a veneer of just falsehood and fakery when it comes to these kinds of movies,
Yeah.
and I'm grasping at straws to put it into words, but that's really what I'm getting. Like, it's all just it's fake, it's not real, and they're maybe not trying to hide it, maybe not trying to set the tone and make you think, "Okay, this is gonna scare me." I don't know.
Yeah.
Have we moved away from it, do you think?
Oh, at this point, yeah, I think we're in a good era now where I think people are trying to make scary movies. I think they are trying to write believable characters for the most part. I
Right.
can't think of any like recent movies that are as schlocky as this, really. I mean,
Yeah,
even there's movies I very much disliked, like Smile and Skinamarink, but they're not schlocky. I just don't
yeah.
like them.
Is Skinamarink the one about the video and the little boy?
Yeah, it's the one where, like, you never see the characters pretty much, and it's all this, like,
Yeah, okay.
sound and film grain.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't like that one either. Okay, I was trying to think, have we seen any movies like this recently? I agree with you, I think we are in an era where people are trying to make characters relatable and trying to make the scary thing actually scary. I love that we're also in an era where people are making, like, intellectual horror films
Yeah.
because that's, like, right up my alley, I love stuff like that. So, yeah, we're living in it. That's one thing to look forward to.
Yeah, so what occurred to me, this remake was, like, basically, to me, like, the worst way you could remake The Fog is to modernize it to 2005, which has made it now age worse than the original. The best
Mhm.
way I think you could remake this is have Robert Eggers do it, and it takes place in, like, 1950 or something, because you gotta keep that radio aspect. but just
Yeah,
have it be
yeah.
even older and even more grounded and even grittier. That's the
So
direction a
you
Fog remake would work in.
yeah, you're thinking that there needed to be a fog rolling into the lighthouse that had pirate ghosts interspersed in it.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, I can imagine a way that this movie could be remade well, 100%. And now that I think about those kinds of movies, I'm like, what a missed opportunity. But I do think there are a lot of movies that are being remade again, and it's maybe a little bit of a reflection on that they think someone tried to remake this 20 years ago and it sucked. So let's see if I can make it better. I don't
Yeah.
know. Um, but let me throw a couple of things out that I liked about the 2005 version. I do think the intro was creepier than the campfire story because it opens with those guys in the past and it opens with I can't remember exactly how the scene plays out or what part of it, but the beginning is creepy.
Yeah. So I agree with that, but I love a good campfire story. So it wasn't scary at all, but it was a vibe. Like I love that in the old Friday
Yeah,
the 13th movies and the burning. Basically anything where you tell me a spooky story in the beginning, I'm kind of on board.
right. Um I do like that the scales of justice were on there. I thought it was sort of not explained well and stupid, but that created the vibe of, like, we want revenge. So, I thought it worked well with the theme, I guess. And then I feel like the radio station announcements were clearer to me. I feel like in general, I felt like everything that was happening was portrayed clearer and more comprehensively. And and now that we are talking about it, I imagine the reason that's because they're trying to appeal to a certain demographic of people who want it spoon-fed to them, of people who don't want nuance, right? And there was a little bit of nuance in the first. Um, I think Selma Blair was a very clear radio DJ, and I felt a little like, "What the heck is Adrienne Barbeau doing? Why is she being so sultry?" So, maybe for me, that was just, like, my moment of, uh, I'm being a dumb early 2000s kid and, like, I needed to be explained to me like I'm 5, but that was one thing I did like. I was like, "Oh, okay, I get what's happening now." And it could just be that because I saw the first one, and so I understand. But she was making some announcements, like, all of her radio announcements I didn't get because it was just, like, random radio announcements. And then in the next movie, I it just made sense to me. So oh, okay, so here we have Brian's biggest issue. Now, I don't know if this is gonna be for the 1980 movie or the 2005. I feel like you kind of touched on the 2005. What's your biggest issue from the 1980?
Okay, my biggest issue in 1980 is definitely just Nick and Elizabeth adding nothing to the movie.
Yeah,
And they don't really add anything to the remake either.
yeah, agree.
They're kind of just protagonists for the sake of protagonists, but we already have better characters we could be following. And they're also the way they connect to the other characters is so tenuous. It's like they're not connected at all until they hear the broadcast about how Stevie says, "Someone get my kid, he needs help," after the babysitter gets attacked.
Right.
And then that's the only connection really, and then they go to the church and then they connect with the priest, but yeah, there's no real point to them, and then in the remake, they add the lore that all of these people are descendants of the ones who killed
Right.
Blake. And then there's also the revelation that in the remake, Elizabeth is apparently the reincarnation of Blake's lover.
Yeah, or his wife, I guess? Yeah, I didn't get
So
that.
she's simultaneously the descendant of one of the people who murdered Blake and also the reincarnation of his wife or
Yeah,
lover.
that was what they added.
That's very
Yeah.
strange. And then we can just talk about, so in the original, basically, it ends when the priest gives up the gold cross and he says, "Take me." And at first you think they're gonna let him go, but then he gets murdered at the last second and cut the credits.
I wanted to say something about that, and I didn't write it down, and now that you say it, I remember. That was fucking awesome. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, that was
I was
awesome.
not expecting that at all, and when he's like, "Why didn't they take me?" And they're like, "Well, you asked for it." And he just fucking I mean, it looks like he decapitates him,
Yeah.
but it cuts the scene before it happens. I love stuff like that. I love where it's like, you're all but told this is how it goes, but we don't show it to you right at the last second. It's so great. I love it. I was very impressed by that shot.
And then in the remake, we get some interesting turn of events with the revelation that Elizabeth is the reincarnation of Blake's lover. She turns into a ghost and
Yeah,
disappears.
I didn't understand that. She sees them, like, immolate the mayor, and he's like, "The contract."
Yeah, I didn't get that
I
either.
didn't
I
get that
didn't.
either, but he's like, "The contract," and the mayor takes the contract, and then he bursts into flames, and she's like first of all, they don't react to seeing a man get set on fire. That was weird for me. I was like, "You're watching this happen, and neither of you are reacting. Neither Tom Welling nor Maggie Grace have a response to this. They don't react." And then Tom Welling's like or Nick is like, "We gotta go." And so he walks off, but she's like, "What? Wait 1 second." For no reason, walks over to the ghost, and he just kisses her and transforms her into a ghost. It didn't make any sense. I didn't get it.
Yeah, I was just completely baffled at this point. I'm like, they just wanted to do something different and they put zero thought into it. And making everyone, instead of just the priest, be descendants of the betrayers, it adds nothing to the story except it makes this revelation weirder because she's also a descendant of one of the people who killed him. And then she just disappears. Like, it's not like she was a ghost or something. Like,
Right.
that would have been a better reveal that
She was the
this whole
ghost.
time she was the ghost of Blake's lover.
Yeah.
But no, she was a regular ass, like 20-year-old person who lived in this town. And now she's turned into a ghost and vanished into thin air. Is this justice?
What would have been better is if all of her dreams and her visions were her connection to Blake. I think that's what it's supposed to be, but it should have been better established, and maybe he was even having some kind of influence on her so that by the end, it makes sense and we can connect it, and she follows him into the fog. That would have made more sense. She follows him into the fog, like, they didn't really play up that fog element when it came to those see-through skeletons. But if they had, they could have had her follow him as he's turning away and she's drawn to him and goes through the fog. Like that, I don't know, that could have been cool.
Yeah, so there were some cool aspects in the remake where they were kind of blending the fog into the ghosts and doing some stuff with it. Whereas in the original, it's basically like the fog's just a precursor to the ghost showing up and stabbing you to death.
Mm, yeah.
But then they pretty much completely abandon it, and you just get these like Pirates of the Caribbean looking skeleton ghosts, and they're just standing in broad daylight. And
Yeah.
it's just like you you were onto something and then you completely abandoned it and you added a twist that makes absolutely no sense. And I just don't understand why they did any of this.
I mean, like you said, John Carpenter was on board with it, which surprises me. But yeah. Do we have a favorite part of the movie? I'll tell you my favorite part of the 1980 movie is when that old lady goes to answer the door and she gets pulled in because the kid is like, "My mom said don't go close to the door," and she, like, closes it and is like, "The fog is so strange," and then someone knocks on it and she's like, "Let me answer the door." It was so stupid and so funny, and that was my favorite part of the movie.
You know what I love about this part is when the kid wants to watch and she's like, go. He's like, no, just 1 minute more. He's like, no. And so he goes. And then the 1 minute later is when she gets
Yeah.
grabbed and pulled into the fog and
Yeah.
killed. It just had really great comedic timing.
And then in the remake, my favorite part of the remake. Oh, my favorite part of the remake is the stupidest part of the remake. She finds the tape that exonerates the guy when they accuse Spooner of killing all the kids on that boat. And she finds the tape that shows him clearly not killing them. They die like through some other third party off screen killing them. And she proceeds to drop it in the water.
Yeah.
And then is like, oh, by the way, she says it in passing when she sees Nick later on. She's like, me, but what about me? Oh, by the way, he didn't kill those guys. I saw it on the tape. But me. I was like, oh my God, bury the fucking lead. It was
Yeah.
ridiculous. She's like, look at this journal I found, and it's all about me. And my name is in there, my grandparents' names, and all of our names. And Tom's like, well, my boat is fucked up. And my best friend is being accused of murder. Like, real shit now, girl. What are you talking about? And then he just drops it when she's like, "Look at those frames on the wall." And he's like, "Okay, now I'm a part of it." It was just so weird. Like, he went from being, You're on some shit right now," to, "Okay, here we go. I get it." Like, there's no convincing him to be on board with this. But yeah, I love that she finds the tape that exonerates him and fucking drops it in the water.
Yeah. So they did all these changes in service of giving Elizabeth a little bit of relevance. But at the same time, they make her like the most annoying character in the whole movie.
Uh, well, at the risk of Maggie Grace ever hearing this, I fucking hate Maggie Grace. I feel like everything I've seen her in is always the same. I hated her in Lost. I hate her in, like, everything I've seen her in. So, Maggie Grace being a character that's like, "But me? But what about me?" just feels so on par for her.
Yeah.
Which, again, I know nothing about her, and sorry if you ever hear this because you're a lovely person, I don't know, but the characters you play are whiny bitches, so
So my favorite part of the original Fog, I think maybe the first time they just roll up and massacre the fishing boat was really good. I thought
Mm.
there was just good tension throughout. The theme of them knocking in the original felt very effective and built tension. And in the remake, it just felt like an afterthought. It's like, oh, there was some knocking in the original. We should throw that in here and there.
Yeah.
And my favorite part in the remake is definitely it's something that can't happen in late 70s movies. It's when she Googles the curse. I love scenes of horror protagonists Googling their curse. I'm such a sucker for it.
Yeah, and you wanna go online and find the websites they were looking at?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. I've definitely had that thought when I'm watching a movie, and I
I
forget
want to
the
make
second the movie's
I want to
over.
make a super cut of all the times horror protagonists just Google their curse.
Yeah. Well, you could make an entire movie out of supernatural episodes because they do
Okay,
nothing.
that doesn't
Well, I
count.
know,
That's
I'm just saying,
cheating.
they do nothing but Google supernatural things.
That's Googling the curse, the show.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so what did we learn here?
Well, I definitely learned about the CW core horror remake cinematic universe. I did not know the full extent of that.
Okay. Well, I learned something before I started talking with you, and I learned something while I was starting to talk with you. I think I my takeaway from this is I really did not realize how vapid the early 2000s were.
Yeah.
Really, just straight up plastic bubblehead. Like, the hell? We lived through that. Shit. My original takeaway is that maybe I'm not a 70s slasher fan because I think that at the end of the day, the original did kind of boil down to being a 70s slasher. And that may have been the thing that rubbed me the wrong way. And I will say that after we've talked about it a bit, my opinion has softened somewhat. Um, but yeah, not a fan of 70s slashers. So what are you thinking for your rating?
Alright, so for the original, I think I'd give it a 3.5, and for the remake, I think I'd give it a 1.5.
Okay. We're not so far away from each other. I would give the original a 3. And then I gave the remake a 2.5. Just because I didn't think it was, like, poorly shot. We didn't talk about any of the production value of the remake, but it was, a sleek, modern movie, so there wasn't anything special about it, but it didn't feel it was better than Pumpkinhead, I'll say that.
Yeah, so it
So that's
definitely
why I feel like
the CG
2.5
was a
works.
lot better than Pumpkinhead, and I was gonna give it a lot of credit until the see-through skeleton ghost came up, and then I was just like, "Nah, you went too hard into the early 2000s CG and you ruined it." Because there were scenes in the remake where it was actually kind of subtle. You couldn't see the ghosts. They were like silhouettes like in the original, and they were effective. When they first roll in, that scene looked really good and they were spooky. And then you just show them in broad daylight and you can see right through them and they look so just like it looks like they belong in a fantasy movie, not a horror movie, or maybe an episode of a CW show. I don't know.
Well, there you go. Yeah. I also wonder if some movies this is clearly not one of them, if some movies were made keeping in mind the fact that they may be on TV, you know? So they organized the structure of the movie so that certain things could be cut out if needed, or certain things could be changed around so that it was safe for TV. Because, at the time, people were still watching TV. People hadn't started cutting the cord yet, I don't think. And so
I mean, I
I
don't
just
think you'd
remember
have
there
to cut
being
in
the
anything.
TV version.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd have to cut anything out of the 2005 remake, really.
I don't know.
The sex scene, I guess.
Yeah. But there really wasn't one. I mean, it was just like a couple of shots of them of skin touching and wet in the
Yeah.
shower. That was it. That was definitely a safe for TV scene. But anyway.
I also just wanted to I wanted to compare the priests in the two movies.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
I thought Father Malone in the original was a good character.
Yeah.
He just had a presence and he felt like he had layers to him. And then in the remake, he's like a deranged homeless person, maybe
Yeah.
mentally ill, constantly
Because they
drunk,
swap
disheveled.
They
What were they
swapped the
going for there?
characters. They took Elizabeth, made her more significant, and gave her the the plot device to essentially establish what was happening in the movie, and
Yeah.
took it away from Father Malone. So now Elizabeth's important and Father Malone is not. I mean, he was essentially not existent until for save for a couple of conversations,
Yeah, he
but
still finds the diary, but that's about it.
and then why is he a drunk? Why is he so upset? Why is he a drunk? Why is he so upset? He doesn't even know about these things yet. It seems like he was a
Yeah, he
drunkard
just
before
found out.
he finds out the
Yeah,
information.
exactly. And so there's like the trope of like the harbinger in movies of this era where they're like, "You're doomed, turn back," you know? I feel like maybe they're
Yeah,
trying to make him one of those guys because he seems like very unreliable, drunk,
right.
disheveled, but at the same time, he's giving you the same information that the original, like respectable, like troubled priest. Basically, he just finds his journal and he tells about the relations. So it's like they give him basically the same job, but they make him a weird homeless guy instead. I did not get that
Yeah,
change. And
yeah,
just the acting of that was very strange too.
yeah. I honestly think that they just swapped the characters and their function, and because they did that, they had to do something else with Father Malone. I don't know, they wanted the character I mean, that's the other thing, those movies were very hot girl centric, and so they needed this movie to be hot girl centric.
Yeah.
So, what is on the agenda for next week?
Next week, we're watching Deathgasm.
Oh my god. I saw that. I think it's a random thing I put on there.
Yeah,
I know
you
nothing
put it
about it,
on there.
so this should be interesting. Okay, awesome. Till next time.
All right, until next time.
This podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike 4.0 International License. For additional information and other media content, visit theferalthread.com. Thanks for listening. Until next week.